Hello everyone and welcome. In this video we're going to take a look at some different components of the lion's share. This is in There's Treasure Inside. Treasure Hunt, if you're not familiar with it, it's a book that has 5 different treasures, one of which, the lion's share, is the largest one, and it spans over 23 chapters. And we're just going to look at some different things regarding it. The first one is the how to read section. It has different directions on how to read the book, and I believe some different clues or just methods of, well, how we should read from the author. Then just some patterns and things that could mean something within the book. The digital images that are found throughout these chapters, and then also the table of contents resource. If you want to use this spreadsheet, I have some different things in there and you can take a look at it and get organized if you want, because spreadsheets are great. The first will be the how to read. Now, this is a section in the introductions, page 16 and 17, and maybe one of the most important parts. That is just because it'll tell us how to read, and that's how Jon Collins-Black, the author, wants us to take a look at the book. In that, there's a few things. Every chapter has something of value to take from it, a lesson, a message, or something that we can apply to our daily lives. To me, it meant, well, every chapter has a clue into it. And if you continue, it later says almost every chapter of the first 23 include at least some morsel of information helpful to finding the location of the largest treasure box. So this is telling us there is something in pretty much every chapter. Perhaps the one that doesn't have something it's missing or will help confirm the clues in the other ones. But in any case, each one has something to do with it. And in the patterns, we'll kind of look more at least how I would assume someone who is making a treasure hunt would put it there. Another part that jumped out to me in the how to read section was when Jon said the first thing I would advise is to read through it thoughtfully. Then I'd suggest jotting down anything that makes your spidey sense tingle. To me, that's interesting that perhaps there's some sort of clue or way that he writes that's there. And so, again, writing down like a sentence or something, it almost seems like there is a pattern to it where this is the sentence that's important, write it down, and maybe if you put all 23 of those things down, there will be something. Just interesting that there seems, again, this component of taking one thing or like around one thing from each chapter. Now, the last thing is if there's a topic or story captivating or intriguing, that you should go and research further. I invite you to do so. It's not outside of the realm of possibilities, because that might be his exact intention. It's like pulling something from each thing that, I don't know, his spidey senses seems vague, seems kind of like it pops out, and there might be some topics or story as well that might be part of this hunt. So again, those are kind of the 3 main things that jumped out to me in this how to read section. Of course, there's more information in it, but I found it really interesting. And, I'm trying to write down and jot those. Now, this next part is looking for patterns. So this is my thoughts. It is creating a treasure hunt like this. I think there's like a clue per chapter, as I've mentioned in that previous thing, some sort of structure that would make sense to the readers. I don't think it's going to be something completely random like, oh, you're supposed to take the first word from the sentence after I say me or something. It's not going to be something super abstract like that. And based off of that first part, there might be a pattern like, here's this sentence that's from section 1, or maybe the description for each one, the theme of each chapter. There's going to be a sentence that, aligns to that theme, and that's what you need to pull from it. Again, there has to be some sort of structure that would make sense. I don't think it's going to be crazy abstract, but I didn't make the hunt. These are just thoughts for it. Now, in the patterns, one thing that I would have done if I was writing it, or one place that seems like it would make sense for patterns, would be those chapter titles and that first page in each chapter. So there's the numbers, there's bars, there's even quotes in those chapter title pages. Another part that I found, different patterns that I found at least interesting, were the backgrounds and why different types of backgrounds for, different reasons, or maybe just because of the design they decided. And start with the numbers. So what I mean by that is that each chapter kind of has these numbers, and there's different like areas that are more worn, I guess would be the best way. And whether or not it means something or it's just the designer, who knows. I'm also thinking of this as Ready Player One was referenced in one of the chapters, and there was an actual like treasure hunt or puzzle in that book, and it was partially from letters being worn a little bit further. So I found that interesting and kind of in the mindset of, well, that was a book that he at least read or knew of, and so it could be something like that. Now, in this, I did kind of myself put some lines there, so you can see these kind of black lines are like, okay, these are where the wares were, and some of them kind of continued. Red were changes, like they moved or something was different from 2 to 3, 3 to 4, stuff like that. And ultimately, I didn't get anything from this outside of, well, yeah, there are some different wares. So might be nothing, might be something. I'm sure I missed some of the different wares too, but I just found that kind of interesting. Like that would be a place where you could look at all of them and see, is there some sort of pattern? Next part, like I mentioned, was the lines. Now this was from the ebook, and so I, just took the screenshots of those and cropped them out. It was interesting at first where the first couple ones weren't, the exact size. And again, it's from me, cropping them. But it was interesting that it was just drastically different sizes. I did take a ruler. I did, measure them in the book, and they're all the same size. So it's just, I think, just a formatting thing. But, go ahead and try that out for yourself. I did go ahead and just kind of resize them here. I just wanted to make notes that it was a different size. And, again, there's clearly where that's different from each one. And what it means, who knows? Like in my other one, I was like, this has to be a barcode or something. I don't think it is, but there are some patterns there, and it's kind of interesting where like this section here has a lot of the wear. They all pretty much look like the same thing, so it might just be like, yeah, make this kind of tethered or torn, and that might be it. There might be something with them. You might need to like, I don't know, move them around or line them up. Again, I don't know if this was the intention to line them all and look at them like this. Could be other things too, but again, it's enough of a thing where you can actively take from each one. It was interesting that, well, it is just different like this. And whether or not it's intentional in the sense of it's a clue, not sure. Now, next was the background colors and just the components of it. And this was all kind of my own speculation of these. Take it for what you will or not. This is just, again, getting into the design of why were they in these different colors or things and different components, and see if there's any trends with it. It is important. This was from looking at the ebook of the lion's share. So I've kind of just taken what was in there, and those sections did not include the part 2 treasure chapters, but it did include the end section that had more treasures and things like that. So which included like the Joy's Serenade poem. Keep that in mind. There would be more black backgrounds, as part 2 is pretty much all this black background, just to show the majority of it in those were the white background. I just said the antique background, but there were different, like more or less like kind of that orangish faded color. And so there might be, another component there. The full images, I didn't include what the background was. So some of those full images were like that bluish background. Some were black, some were the whitish background, but it didn't have any words. And it just had, some sort of image to it, whether it was a digital image, whether it was a treasure image, or a photo of a real person or, signature, things like that. I was just thinking, and, in the back of my head, was there a specific reason for those, or is it random? Is it that there are some clues if it's an antique background and white is just words, all of that. Now, in this chart, I wanted to just highlight that it's a 100% stacked chart, meaning that each category that I picked for it will go from the 100%. So I ultimately did that just because the text type, where it was just text, no images, nothing else, was the largest one. And if I put this as a scale to each one, this column would be super tall and all the other ones would be like down here at 2 or 1, where this was the majority of it, where it was just text. The other component too is that I included what I saw on each one, and there would be other ways to break this down, but the example would be is if it had the box photo, what was on it. And in this, there are 3 of them with a white background, 2 that were just the full picture of a box. And another example with that is that there was some that had the box, a picture of the box, whether it's a line share or one of the other components, and text. Ultimately, what I found that was interesting is like this antique was majority when it was just words. There were some if it was digital images or like other types of images, and those were kind of the only categories. Whereas again, this is the darker black backgrounds were more the end of the book. There were some that were in the first section, but it's just kind of interesting to see it in this sort of way. Just in case I haven't confused you enough, or you wanted to know, basically I had the page numbers here, and then I would select what the page type was, and then include different, what I noticed of them, which these were kind of the main types, and that's where I got this information. Made it into this pivot table if you are interested, and in this, I ultimately then use that more organized data in order to create these 2 graphs to represent them more. I could have some of these things off, but ultimately, this is what I did for it. Whether or not there are patterns in this, or did you even need to do this? Who knows? To me, it helped kind of find the layout and a little bit better of an understanding as an author and why you put them in different places, but could result in nothing. Now, the next part that I wanted to kind of discuss was the digital images. So there's a lot of digital images that were, artificially created or created with AI. I went ahead and used a detecting AI generated images. It's the Site Engine is the source that I used, and just put all of the ones that to me looked like they were AI generated and went to see. The majority of them did seem like Midjourney was used or Stable Diffusion. There was one, which was the basketball one on page 120, that when I first went through didn't seem like it was, which was kind of interesting to me. Now, all I did to find these was the ebook, Apple's ebook, and then essentially cropped it, put it in to check, and most of them were there. Now again, I wanted to check if this source seemed like it did work on them, and ultimately from what I saw, yeah, it is a decent generated detector. Did one of the real photos, and this is like the artwork from the Apotheosis of Hercules, I believe, did show as not AI generated. So the one in question, I went ahead and tried it again, and I did pretty much the same thing, and then it got up to 12%. I used another one called wasitai.com, and it said that it was. So, it does still have that component, but perhaps it was drawn or, used as artwork there. But ultimately, the question still remains, can there be something hidden within these AI-generated ones or not? And ultimately, I think certain components of it can be changed and it wouldn't alter, it's already AI generated and then you could, add things. But I think the vast majority of it isn't like a big clue there, but little things could be hidden within it. What I mean by that, I am stressing I personally went through and tried, editing one of these, and you might be able to see or not, I just tried to spell help in it. So I added a couple of different lines versus the original one in the book doesn't have that. And, it's obvious once you point it out, but it might not be if you, don't have the main one to source. It didn't do too much with the percentage, at least on this one, when I ran this through as well. The Midjourney did increase, which was kind of interesting. Again, I I got at least 10% difference when I put these through. But ultimately, I think there could be something hidden. Like you could see in these original ones, some of the lines might have something hidden within it. Or it might just ultimately be to capture that moment or to add to it. Like, some of them have him playing basketball, and that's the big part. I want an image of playing basketball versus there's a secret hidden message if you, crop it or view here or there. Again, I think there's space that it could have smaller details in it, but not the majority of it. Ultimately, I'd say that it's probably the message behind the whole thing would be more what I would lean to, but I didn't create the hunt, and I don't know. Moving on, we're going to take a look at this kind of next getting organized spreadsheet, and you can, of course, use this if you want. I'll have a link to make a copy of it, but ultimately I made it with the index of, part 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, to be able to sort if you want, and then go back to the indexing. It'll have the chapters, the title, what it is, and then the count of pages, just in case, like, for example, you want to see the count of pages and reorder it, or reorder it based off of the subtext, things like that. It includes the titles, the subtext. I added the spider sense notes, and I personally have been going through and just, picking out sentences or two in each one, or something that just made me go, that's interesting, just to see if it lines up with anything. I also have the quotes. Some have one quote, some have two quotes, and it's all there if you want to get a little more organized instead of you writing all of these details down yourself. Again, more than welcome to. Now, the one thing that is important on this one, I've kind of gone back and forth of the lion's share ebook and then, the whole book. This one with the pages is based off of the hard copy book. Looking at these page numbers, it'll be slightly different than like the graphs that I showed earlier. So just keep that in mind. But again, feel free if you want to organize yourself. Here's all those details as a template if you are wanting. So let's circle back and just kind of review what was looked at here. And, it's a whole lot of, well, in some ways nothing, but just getting prepared to start reading this. I don't think that this is going to be one of those solved in a day or, you read it once and then you know everything. There's a lot of different components and a lot of pieces to kind of, I think, gather together, and there's probably a lot more that I didn't even talk about in this one. I think the how to read directions is really important, that every chapter has a clue, or almost every chapter, whatever that means. Here's looking at page 90. The spider senses is, trying to pull a sentence or something like that. Now, patterns, I do think that that's important as a planner, that there has to be some sort of pattern that he made, whether or not it's something with the titles like I was kind of exploring, or something else like the sentence that has some sort of thing, or, who knows. Digital images, I think that it's the message of the overall image, but there could be some small hidden details in there as well. And then, there's that table of contents. Take some notes. Whether you do that or on paper, it's up to you. But hopefully that is helpful if you do prefer a digital kind of source like I do. As I mentioned, there are a lot of pieces, and, there's this each chapter clue, or almost every chapter clue. There's even the Joyce Serenade poem I didn't talk about in this video. The sleeve cover haiku probably should have been in parentheses because I don't think it's a true haiku. There's the chapter descriptions, that could be something. The quotes could be something. The theme of the chapters, page 90, backgrounds and images. There's even the unbreakable threads, or I think that should be thread instead of threads. I can't remember, but the children books, optional clues. And I'm sure there's a lot more in there too. So I think taking all of these things into consideration is needed to solve it. And, frankly, I don't have a solve. I don't have a state even that I'm really focused on at this point. It's just, I think, important to take a step back, read all of it, try to get the messages, and then start digging in and kind of, taking a closer look of what is generally in there, what elements are included, what elements are excluded, and things like that. So hopefully you find this helpful. If you have any other things that you think might be a big piece of this that either isn't included on this or, haven't said, feel free to leave it in the comments. It's always interesting to hear all the different pieces there. If you found something, that you think I made a mistake with these, always happy to hear those as well. And, any other comments or any of those things. So thanks for watching. Do those social things, like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye now.